I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine.
I'm Big Boy Pants Golf, and I lurk in the shadows, so grifters beware.
Today we are talking about the science of heat, and more specifically, the science of heating, the verb. Meaning if you go into the sauna more frequently, you become a better sweater. Not a sweater you wear, but the...
Seems harmless enough. It feels like we're in a medical lecture at Stanford with this esteemed professor at Stanford, Andrew Huberman. But stay with me throughout this entire episode, and you'll come away with a different opinion of Dr. Huberman. As we go through the studies that he cites, we raise more questions that Andrew Huberman himself should have asked before he put this out as science. Because at least to me, and you may draw the same conclusion at home, this is all junk science. Junk science.
Heat applied properly as a stimulus can engage certain neurochemical systems in your brain and body. We will talk about those data today.
So we'll go through the data he cites, and we'll determine, would you draw the same conclusions that he does based on the nature of the studies he provides?
So anytime we're talking about heat, meaning deliberate heat exposure, things like sauna.
Andrew Huberman uses the word sauna. This New York Times article titled, "Saunas are filling up, but are they actually good for you? Sweating in small hot rooms has been a wellness staple for centuries, but don't believe everything you hear." Saunas themselves come in different permutations. For example, Finnish-style saunas are typically built from wood and known for their dry heat. Pay special attention to how hereafter Andrew Huberman doesn't focus on the details of Finnish saunas, the saunas that are used in the studies he references. Also, keep in mind as this episode heats up, figuratively, not literally like a sauna, that there are different types of saunas.
It's very important to understand not just the stimulus.
It's funny that Huberman says not just the stimulus, because I don't think he even understands the stimulus.
How hot something is, how long you're in a sauna, etc., but the effect that has on your shell and on your core.
Huberman relies on the fact that people won't be paying attention, and any of these gaps in his logic or the studies, he'll just be able to fill in with his pseudoscience.
If you can understand that, you can design protocols that are literally perfect for your goals. At this point in time, meaning when looking at the research out there, it isn't clear what the optimal sauna protocol is going to be specifically to increase FOXO3, and that's probably because there isn't one. I promise to make the description of that which follows very clear, even if you don't have a background in biology.
Despite not having a background in biology, I have a background in reading comprehension. So I'm going to use that later when we go through the facts that Andrew Huberman presents.
Well, then you will be in the best possible position to use sauna or hot tub or other tools, even just a hot shower.
Again, Andrew Huberman is using a study that references a Finnish sauna that has low humidity, there's a wood-burning stove, etc. And now he's generalizing as heat is heat. Now it's hot tub or even a hot shower. Where are the studies that show anything outside of a Finnish sauna? You know, the other types of saunas that we're mentioning, the Turkish bath, etc. The study specifically points out Finnish sauna, and now for some reason, Andrew Huberman thinks that you could also extrapolate this to any other type of sauna or a hot tub or even a hot shower.
As a powerful stimulus to optimize your biology. Now, the science of heat and heating, and cold and cooling for that matter, goes back well over 100 years.
The Finnish sauna is thought to have been around for over 2,000 years.
In fact, it's kind of amusing to me that nowadays there's a kind of renewed interest in the use of heat and cold.
It's because of you and people like you that there's this renewed interest in using heat and cold.
Because this was the first topic that I studied as an undergraduate, and in fact I did my graduate thesis on thermal regulation.
So this guy has been about thermal regulation for a long time, and now that guys like Wim Hof have brought it into the mainstream, he's kind of bandwagoned on it and now trying to make it more mainstream because at the end of the day, there's some lucrativeness. I didn't realize how much lucrativeness there was in this NIH grift until Rand Paul brought this up on the Senate floor.
I think the American people should know about where their money's going to.
So who's paying for this junk science? In good part, my friends, it's you at home, the taxpayer.
So the NIH spent $2 million in research to see if using a hot tub can lower stress.
From NIH.gov, budget, research for the people. The NIH invests most of its $45 billion budget in medical research for the American people. Over 84% of NIH's funding is awarded for extramural research, largely through almost 50,000 competitive grants to more than 300,000 researchers at more than 2,500 universities, medical schools, and other research institutions in every state.
Now, the NIH also spent about $1 million to see if they could help people overcome their fear of dentists.
Just in terms of medical schools, here are the 20 medical schools with the most NIH funding according to U.S. News. Number 1 is Harvard at almost $2 billion. And then you have number 14, Stanford Medical School, at $531 million in 2022.
$7 million for an automatically flushing toilet. And here's the bonus. The toilet will actually take pictures of your derriere.
In terms of total sleep research funding by the NIH over the past decade, you can see the figures here. Over $4 billion USD has been spent in just the past decade alone, and you can see also that the numbers keep increasing.
How does this go on and nobody does anything?
Big Boy Pants Golf is here to do something and not just continue to be YouTube's hottest golf channel. This article by Dr. Brandon Peters, titled The Science and Hucksters of Sleep. It's from 2016.
Nobody denies the waste. Nobody denies the ridiculous projects that are being funded, and yet year in, year out, it continues.
But thermoregulation was considered more, a thing for the physiologists. Nowadays, not just on social media, not just in the landscape of biohackers and athletes.
I've seen way too many golfers hop into a bucket of ice or a sauna to improve their golf performance. What I'm wondering is if this is even safe. In relation to this article, sauna bathing, a warm heart proves beneficial on the NIH.gov website, it states that in 2008, mortality in saunas was ascribed in a Swedish study performed between 1993 and 2002. It turned out that in 77 casualties, 44% of these deaths were related to alcohol and 23% to cardiovascular diseases. Main point, there were 77 deaths in saunas.
And frankly, in the general ethos around health optimization,
I don't think Dr. Andrew Huberman can go more than 5 minutes without saying optimization or protocol.
people are really interested in heat and cold. And the reason they're so interested in heat and cold is that a lot of the science has been done both in animal models, in mice, and in humans.
I pulled up the NIH article related to mice
that point to the mechanisms by which deliberate heat exposure can help protect against different forms of mortality, improve health overall, and possibly, and I want to highlight possibly extend life. One such mechanism involves a genetic program involving a molecule called FOXO3.
The NIH article that came up when I Googled rats and FOXO3 states that, however, whether heat stress treatment induces FOXO3A phosphorylation in rat skeleton muscle remains unclear. Apparently, these rats were treated like they were in the movie Saw. There were 32 male Wistar rats, which are albino rats. They were 15 weeks old. And then you had them after an overnight fast, so they didn't even get a last meal. One leg of each rat in the experimental group was immersed in hot water at 43 degrees for 30 minutes, and the soleus and plantaris muscles in both legs were removed immediately, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 24 hours after the heat stress. Is it just me, Or does this experiment seem a little bit cruel? And how much can you draw from this experiment on these rats over to humans?
These are the likely biological mechanisms for the improvements in lifespan. One especially interesting thing about FOXO3, there are individuals out there that have either additional copies of FOXO3 or who have versions of FOXO3 that are hyperactive.
Huberman finally addresses the genetic component, which I guess he doesn't want to focus on because you can't optimize it. But if your parents lived a long time, there's a good chance you're going to also live a long time too.
And translates immediately to protocols that anyone can use.
Does it really though? I've done some of the research. I don't necessarily think that this will translate over into stuff that we can use unless you happen to be a middle-aged man in Finland.
A brief warning now and another brief warning later. Anytime you're talking about heating up your body, you need to be very cautious because...
There you go. Now here's the warning of, you know what, I'm going to tell you to do all this stuff. It's supposed to be good for you, but be careful because there's other science that says it's dangerous.
Unlike cooling down, where you have a fairly broad range of cold temperatures that you can go into before it's damaging to tissue, well, you don't get to heat up the brain and body very much before you start getting into the realm of neuron damage. And
which is interesting because later in this podcast, he gives a very specific temperature range, I believe around 80 degrees Celsius, that you need to get to get the benefits of this heat therapy.
You definitely have to talk to your doctor.
And maybe the exceptions are these Finnish men who have done this type of saunas for hundreds of years. Likewise, we don't say, hey, look at these Sherpas climbing Mount Everest. Let's all start climbing at high altitudes so we can have the same genetic disposition as a Sherpa.
Proceed with caution. Be smart about it. I don't just say that to protect me. I say that.
No, he does just say that to protect himself. Andrew Huberman literally is just reading off a teleprompter for an hour and a half. Let's get to the meat of this presentation.
Next, I'd like to talk about the use of deliberate heat exposure, including sauna, but other tools as well. But first, I'd like to just emphasize that the use of deliberate heat exposure can be a very powerful way to improve health and longevity.
Again, in Finland, so maybe Finnish people have something different going on. Why don't we conduct a study within the States with our high obesity rates? That points out another potential issue, the survivorship or survivorman fallacy or whatever it's called, where you have this cutoff point before you actually analyze the remaining sample group, and that cutoff is how many people can actually use a sauna. If you aren't healthy enough to use a sauna, well, then you wouldn't be included in the study, would you?
What I like so much about this and the related studies, and yes, I will provide a link to these in the show notes.
Now we have the article, Sauna Bathing is Associated with Reduced Cardiovascular Mortality and Improves Risk Prediction in Men and Women, a Prospective Cohort Study.
This is one of several papers that clearly demonstrate that regular use of sauna or other forms of deliberate heat exposure can reduce mortality to cardiovascular events, but also to other events, things like stroke and other things that basically can kill us.
And in terms of the background of this study, you can see that has a participant sample of 1,688 people, a mean age of 63. From this sample group of 1,688 people with an age range of 53 to 74 years, they followed up on all these people for 15 years, and after 15 years, there were a total of 181 CVD deaths among the 1,688 participants. There's a big difference between a 50-year-old and a 65 to 70-year-old, and that an additional 15 years to a 50-year-old will only bring you to 65. But looking at a 65-year-old 50 years later, now they're 80, and because of their older age in the 80s, they're more at risk to cardiovascular death or stroke or Alzheimer's, etc. The conclusion is higher frequency and duration of sauna bathing are each strongly, inversely, and independently associated with fatal CVD, cardiovascular death, events in middle-aged to elderly males and females. The frequency of sauna bathing improves the prediction of the long-term risk for the CVD mortality. No, it does not. Here's why. First off, you have this Kuopia ischemic heart disease study. It's for these people living in Kuopio and the surrounding rural communities in the east of Finland. All these studies, always Finland. If I told you about a study that involved only Japanese people who played basketball, would you apply that to everyone in the population? So here's a point that Huberman continually leaves out, because later he'll be talking about hot baths and hot showers and hot tubs.
You could, however, immerse yourself in a hot tub or hot water bath up to your neck.
Or maybe even going for a run in...
Put on a hoodie or a wool hat and a hoodie, or you could do like the wrestlers do, and you could actually buy one of these plastic suits.
He's just trying to recreate these fake protocols based on these weak studies. Again, with Finnish saunas, it's dry air with a relative humidity of about 10 to 20%. He doesn't mention this 10 to 20% dry air humidity because he's trying to pitch people something. So here, the duration of the stay in the sauna was from 5 to 20 minutes. And then Huberman obviously uses other studies where guys are staying in for 30 minutes a pop or 2 hours a day a pop.
Become excessively hyperthermic because you can get heat stroke and you can potentially die.
Huberman's do-it-yourself protocols remind me a lot of when Martin Lawrence was jogging in the summer heat while wearing multiple layers of clothing, and then he collapsed and had a temperature of 107 degrees. This happened back in 1999 in LA. Notice that the sunbathing was assessed at baseline by a self-administered questionnaire based on weekly sauna sessions duration and temperature in the sauna room. I mean, come on, people. These researchers doing the study didn't check all this themselves. They just hand you a form and say, hey, fill this out to your best of your knowledge. How often are these accurate when you're trying to tell your doctor how many times a week you work out? You know you worked out 0 times a week and you put about 3. So here, all the cardiovascular deaths, CVD deaths that occurred by the end of 2015 were checked against the hospital documents. So why haven't more studies like this been done with a tighter age gap between the participants? Why not have a study that does people who are age 70 to 72? Maybe there's something with these Finnish people and their diet. And you also forget, do any of these studies ask these people about their parents and look into the genetics? Because again, genetics plays a huge part in whether you'll get CVD and how long you'll live, correct?
Is that they involve a lot of participants. So for instance, in this particular paper, which was published in BMC Medicine, they looked at a sample of 1,688 participants.
1,688 participants from the same region of the world. What Andrew Huberman also leaves out is when he refers to a study in which these sauna treatments help you 16 times your human growth hormone, he fails to mention there's only 10 Finnish men involved. So when the number to him seems impressive, he mentions it, but when he knows the study will come off as less impressive, when you actually mention the number 10 Finnish men, he leaves out the number 10. Go figure.
And basically what they found was the more often that people do sauna, the better their health is. And
the way that this guy can say this with a straight face and just sum it down to this without looking into all the other potential factors, the other potential correlations, and then just seem to indicate that more sauna is the causation for better health. Hopefully at home you're also asking questions.
the lower the likelihood they will die from some sort of cardiovascular event.
And again, why isn't this more clearly broken down in terms of the age range? If in this study, the 50-year-olds were going to the sauna more, which might be normal for a 51, 52-year-old to go to a sauna more often than a 75, 77-year-old, then the people who were going were younger And it's not because of the frequency of going to the sauna that they didn't die of a cardiovascular event. It's that the people that went less frequently were older and thus more likely to be in that group of old age-related deaths, including cardiovascular disease and stroke, etc. But we'll take it even further. When you do these kind of studies of sauna or cold, or as the other podcast that Huberman does, where you have a person do light activity for 20 minutes and then do some kind of memory or mental test, or on the opposite spectrum, meditation and then doing these type of memory or mental agility tests, you don't need a whole lot of resources, and you don't actually need to produce something in the end. You just give them this paper with a bunch of graphs and like P curve and XYZ means this, XYZ assumption that, and then you get your money. Something to think about.
Some people are better at sweating than others. I recommend starting on the lower end of the temperature scale, and if that's too hot for you, that you even lower the temperature further.
So if you lower the temperature further and it's outside of the 80 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius temperature range, as per the studies that he's citing, would you get any benefits at all? Medical research studies. What a great grift. You can get money to study anything, and here's an example of that. These people studied burning calories by watching horror films. Now think of this Black Mirror episode. Earlier in this video, you saw Rand Paul call out for all this wasteful scientific research. Imagine if back in 1986, the same year that 16 times your growth hormone 10-man Finnish study came out, Finland was also having its equivalent of these goofy scientific grants going on, and someone had funded that study as a goof, and now, out of laziness and just a way to slide someone some money, we're using that goofy Finnish study as the basis of all our sauna treatments. Did I blow your mind a little bit? Black Mirror, going full circle, taking everything back. A little bit genius, I know. But stay with me a little bit more and think about the future of studies when we're going to have a study that shows the effect of studying studies. Pick your brain matter up off the floor, because I know it's everywhere right now. Put it back in your head, or at least on a napkin nearby. Get in the comments section and let me know what you think about our esteemed Dr. Andrew Huberman and all the studies he uses to pitch the benefits, or the so-called benefits, of using a sauna.